Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping into some really fascinating source material. It's a devotional that tackles one of the biggest ideas in faith.
It really is. It's all about the connection, or maybe the tension, between what you believe in your head and what you actually, do with your hands and feet.
Exactly. We're calling this Deep Dive Vibrant and Powerful Faith.
And the material really gets going with a very powerful line from James 2.26. It says that just as the body is dead without the spirit, faith is dead without deeds.
Which is such a direct challenge, right? Which just immediately questions the idea that simply having faith is, the end of the story.
It really isn't.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Our sources, they don't just ask what good faith is. They kind of flip the whole thing on its head and ask, is there such a thing as, bad faith?
They're not bad in a moral sense necessarily, more like useless faith, functionally dead.
Right. So our mission today is to figure out what takes a simple belief and turns it into this vibrant, powerful force, and how that force shows up in the real world in work that's often really difficult.
And maybe even thankless.
Yeah, exactly.
And the source material argues that the starting point, the thing we almost always miss, is that the quality of your faith, it depends completely on its object.
Its object, what it's aimed at.
Precisely. Faith itself is just a tool, like trust. It's all about where you point it, not, how much of it you can generate.
Let's dig into that idea of pointing it at the wrong thing. Because that sounds, it sounds pretty harsh. What if someone is just incredibly sincere, pouring their whole heart into a belief?
And that's the difficult part. The source material doesn't really offer any consolation for that sincerity. It uses a very stark example.
Okay.
It talks about people in remote parts of the world who genuinely worship stone idols. They're devoted, they rely on them for help.
Oh.
But the idol is just stone. It can't do anything.
So even if that person has world-class levels of faith, if it's directed at something inert, the result is nothing.
Zero. The depth of your feeling just can't make up for the fact that the object of your faith has no power.
So sincerity isn't the most important variable.
It's basically irrelevant if the foundation is wrong. And this is why the devotional clarifies that salvation, in its view, doesn't come from believing in faith itself as some kind of power.
Like a self-help tool.
Exactly. So salvation comes from directing that faith, that trust specifically toward Jesus Christ as revealed in God's word.
That really turns the modern idea of just believing yourself on its head. This is demanding a very specific external object for that belief.
It is. And when that alignment is correct, that's when you get what the source calls wopu sin. Let's break that down.
Well, it translates to vibrant and powerful faith. But that first part, wopa, it's not just active. It means lively, animated. It suggests a kind of inner energy.
Okay, so what does this animated, vibrant faith require?
It requires the whole person to be involved. First, the mind has to get it. It has to understand the truth. That's the foundation.
But it can't stop there. No. Then the will, your consciousness, has to step in and actually act on that truth. It's a total connection, from the inside straight to the outside.
And that jump, from just agreeing with an idea in your head to actually doing something consistently, that's everything, isn't it?
That's the pivot point.
I think we get those two things confused. The source actually warns against a couple of types of passive belief, right?
It does. It says real faith isn't just head knowledge, like you're meditating on an idea. And it's also not just, an emotional panic that makes you do one big thing and then you're done.
So it's not a feeling, and it's not a one-time decision.
It's a lifetime of obedience that guides your actions. The devotional brings up the people in Hebrews 11. You think about Noah, Abraham, Moses.
People of action.
They were all people of action. God said something, and their faith immediately became movement. They moved countries, they built giant boats, they led entire nations out of slavery. Their faith was measured by what they did.
This brings us to a really subtle but crucial point the sources make. And this is where it gets interesting for anyone, really, whether you're running a company or just trying to raise your kids.
Yeah, this is one of those ideas you need to slow down for. It can change how you see everything.
Okay, so we often hear people say faith is about believing despite the evidence, right? But the source makes this tiny surgical distinction. It says, true faith is not believing regardless of the evidence. But true faith is believing regardless of the outcome. And in the original, that's all ream.
Think about that for a second. The difference is huge. Believing something based on evidence, that's just calculation. If a stock has gone up for 10 years, buying it doesn't take much faith.
Right, you're just following the data.
But let's say you pour your life into a project, a mission, maybe starting a youth center in a tough neighborhood. You have no evidence it will succeed. In fact, all the evidence might point to failure.
The funding could dry up, the kids might not show up.
Exactly. Believing in that mission and continuing to act even when the outcome looks bleak, that's the kind of faith we're talking about. You act because you believe in the command, in the source of the mission, not because you're guaranteed a successful result.
That requires a level of trust that's, frankly, terrifying.
It is. And this whole idea, this action-based faith, it's not a new debate. To really get what's happening in this modern devotional, we have to go back to, well, the Reformation.
To 1517, Martin Luther.
The earthquake that was Martin Luther, his whole revolution was built on one idea: sola fide, justification by faith alone.
He was pushing back against the idea that you could earn your salvation through good deeds or by, buying indulgences.
Right. He was trying to recenter everything on God's grace received through faith. So he looked to the parts of the Bible that really emphasize that, like the book of Romans.
And because he was so focused on that, he developed a kind of allergy to anything that smelled like works.
A very strong allergy, which is where the book of James comes in.
The book that says, show me your faith by your deeds.
Precisely. The source reminds us that Luther had, open contempt for the book of James. He famously called it an epistle of straw.
An epistle of straw, so basically worthless.
Worthless. He thought it was dangerous. He worried it would just lead people right back to trying to earn their way to heaven, constantly anxious about whether they'd done enough.
So you've got this huge, centuries-old theological fight. Romans says it's faith alone. James says faith without action is dead. How does our source material solve this?
It uses a really simple, but I think beautiful analogy: the bird's two wings.
Okay.
It sees faith and deeds, or Romans and James, as the two wings of a bird. Both are absolutely essential for flight. You can't have one without the other.
So let's play that out. What happens if you only have the faith wing, the Romans wing?
Well, you might have the internal belief. God sees you as righteous, but without action, your life doesn't change. You talk a good game, but nothing is different. You're a bird sitting on the ground thinking about flying. As Joms would say, you're dead.
And the other way. If you only have the deeds wing, all action, no faith.
That just becomes frantic striving. It leads to burnout, maybe a sense of self-righteousness. You're doing good things, sure, but why? For approval, to feel good about yourself.
So you're flapping like crazy, but not actually getting any lift.
You've got it. The power isn't there. So faith is the gift, the engine. But the action, the deeds, that's the necessary proof that the engine is actually running. They have to happen together.
That makes so much sense. And to help us see where our own actions fit into this, the source gives us a kind of framework, right? It breaks down work into 4 categories.
Yeah, a taxonomy of service. It's incredibly useful.
Let's go through them. The first and most foundational is duty. Or
duty is what you do because it has to be done without any expectation of a paycheck.
Yeah.
It's inherently sacrificial.
The classic example is a mother caring for a newborn, right?
Yeah.
Waking up all night, no salary, just pure commitment.
That's a perfect example. But it could also be caring for an elderly parent or even just keeping a household running. It's the non-negotiable work required for the well-being of others.
Okay, level 2 is what most of us know. Job. Thought.
Simple enough. This is paid work. Office, factory, sales. You provide a service, you get compensation. It's transactional. The worker deserves their wages.
Then we move up to uncompensated work. The third level is volunteer.
Right. And the key distinction here is the motivation. You volunteer at the hospital or the library because you want to be part of a community, you believe in the cause, or it makes you feel good.
So there's still a kind of return, even if it's not money. It's satisfaction or social connection.
Exactly. Which brings us to the 4th and highest level. This is what connects back to everything we've been talking about.
Holy work or sacred duty. What makes this so different from just being a really dedicated volunteer?
It all comes down to the motivation and the metric for success. Holy work is service done purely out of faith, and here's the key part. It is performed regardless of the outcome.
Regardless of the outcome. Back to that core idea.
The motivation is no longer about feeling good or seeing a project succeed. It's about obedience to a mission you believe was given by God. You do it because you were told to, even if it looks like a total failure from the outside.
So a volunteer might quit if the project loses funding or no one shows up.
But someone engaged in holy work has to keep going. Persistence itself becomes the goal.
And the source gives a really raw, honest example of this, doesn't it? From the speaker himself, Pastor Hu Zikang.
It's a powerful case study. He talks about his own ministry producing spiritual audio and video content.
Things like updates of the moment and so on.
And he's been doing this for nearly 4 years.
Yeah.
His team has produced over 1,500 programs.
1,500. That is a massive amount of work. That's a professional level output. But then comes the really tough part.
The brutal honesty. The source says very clearly that few people watch or listen.
Wow. 4 years of work, 1,500 shows for a tiny audience. I mean, that would be crushing for most people.
It would be. And the source acknowledges that. It says, of course we pray for more viewers. That's the human thing to do. But when the numbers are low, that's not a sign of failure. In this framework, it's reframed as God's glory being maintained through persistence.
So the success metric isn't the viewership numbers. The success metric is that you didn't quit.
You got it. The opportunity to serve is the grace. The persistence is the victory. The people helping him translate and produce the videos, they're not just volunteers. They are performing holy work. They keep lighting their small lamp, not because it's lighting up the whole world, but because they were tasked with keeping it lit.
That is just a radical redefinition of success. It's not about the result. It's about the faithfulness.
It brings it all back home.
Okay, so let's try wrap this up. What have we learned on this deep dive? It feels like it comes down to 3 big ideas.
I think so. First, that true faith needs the right object. It has to be aimed at something with real power.
Second, it demands a radical trust. It's about believing regardless of the outcome, not the evidence.
And finally, that faith has to show up as action, sustained action. And the highest form of that action is holy work, which is all about persistence, even when, especially when you see no results.
The source material leaves us with a couple of really direct questions to think about. The first one is, can you think of a time when you believed regardless of the outcome? What was it and what happened?
And the second is more of a structural question. Do you think it's possible for people to increase their actions for God without also increasing their faith? What happens if you try? It really tests that bird's wings analogy. Can you fly on just one?
That is a lot to chew on. So we'll leave you with this one last thought to take with you. In your own life, your job, your family, your community, if you took away all the rewards, all the paychecks, all the thank yous, all the positive metrics, what would you still keep doing day after day?
Because whatever that is, that's probably where your vibrant and powerful faith really lives.